Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about the mythical monsters that you can acquire from expeditions in a Total War Saga Troy Mythos. There are three: the Hydra, the Griffin, and Cerberus. Well, at number 3, it has to be the Hydra. Now, the Hydra as a unit, as a monster, is an artillery piece. That's how I would describe it if we're looking at the stats. It has a good amount of range. It has a good amount of range damage. It's a single entity artillery piece, though it's not going to be effective against walls, but on the battlefield it kind of fills the same role that a bone giant would fill for, say, the Tomb Kings in Warhammer 3. And it does have poison attacks. It's all about the poison with the Hydra. It can give your entire army poison attacks before a battle, for instance, just as an example. Now, let's talk a bit about the Hydra. Why is it number 3? Well, when we're looking at mythic monsters, you get units, you may get campaign benefits, and you obviously get the powerhouse in battle. But if we're considering the Hydra is by far and away the weakest when it comes to that aspect. The units themselves, I would say, are not especially great. I mean, you can acquire some pre-solid archers and pre-solid infantry at tier 1 from a tier 1 settlement, but keep in mind, by the time you actually acquire the Hydra, you'll be at tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 even. Realistically, you'll certainly be above tier 3, and there are better units at tier 3. And the annoying thing about Hydra unit recruitment is that there's 4 individual structures to recruit these units from. And these units are not especially great individually in the end game, where you would most realistically get the Hydra. In the early game, that would be a very different discussion, because something like a Hydra archer would be pretty solid, but in the later game, there are flat out better units to acquire. Same with the Hydra defenders and drinkers of venom. The Hydra Priest is a different situation because they are spellcasters. They do have limited spells, yes, but they can offer you a good amount of value. But here's the issue. The structures you recruit these units from are very expensive. And lumber is something that is important in any campaign. So spending, let's say, 2k lumber, 3k lumber even, to get some of these units is genuinely not worth it. A bit of a different discussion when we're thinking about the Hydra Priest. That might be worth it, but I've played this entire campaign, turn 75, I'm about to win it, I have not recruited a single unit from the Hydra ones. It's not worth it. And you don't have any kind of economic benefit from these structures. You don't gain any benefit with the Hydra. That is the biggest downfall. The Hydra is all about a bunch of crappy units, some spellcasters that are pretty solid, and then no campaign benefits, which actually make it the worst out of all of them. The Hydra is all about vitality. Vitality is something you can gain post-battle or with certain structures. Generally, it is better to get it post-battle, though it might be the hardest of all of them to actually level up. The reason is because you do need that higher vitality in order to make that thing work. And when we're looking at the special skills that the Hydra can get, all you're really going to get, one way or another, is either a benefit for the Hydra in combat, or a benefit for the units, the Hydra units, which, as I said, they're not that great. In comparison to tier 1 units, okay, but in comparison to actual units you have in a campaign at that point, not really. So when you're looking at the kind of benefits that you do get over here, it genuinely isn't really that great. The best thing you can get with the Hydra is to get a really powerful single entity, and it is a ranged entity. So from a practical standpoint, while the Griffin Patriarch and Cerberus, they might be really powerful in battle, but they are melee units. The Hydra is pretty solid in melee as well, don't get me wrong on that, but it's got 0 armor, so it's going to take a lot of damage. It's more useful from a pure range perspective. It can do a lot of damage. That's the one thing I would say about Hydra Priest and the Hydra itself, is the amount of damage they can do in an individual battle can be pretty significant. But in terms of buffing your empire, you're just not going to have that kind of benefit with the Hydra. You look at these kind of upgrades, there's literally nothing that helps you out on the campaign side of things, with the exception like just giving you some benefits potentially for those Hydra units. So the worst is not worth going for compared to the other two. With the other two, there is a bit of a discussion about which way to go, but with the Hydra, I would genuinely say it's not worth going for in general. The poison, it can be useful, the spells can be useful, sure, but the combat benefits that you gain from the Hydra and the Hydra units don't offset what you lose in comparison to the other two myth creatures in terms of the massive economic faction-wide benefits you can gain from them. Now at number 2 we have the Griffin Patriarch. Now the Griffin Patriarch and the Lesser Griffins you can acquire in a campaign if you go for it. You will obviously get one pretty early on in a campaign for dealing with the rogue army or the scripted army that does appear. But the Griffin Patriarch and the Lesser Griffins, they have pretty solid melee stats. They do have armor at the very least to work with. But the important thing about these particular units, these particular monsters, is that they give you battlefield flexibility. Flying units are actually quite important, but you don't really have that many flying units. You have Harpies, for instance, but Harpies are not that great in combat. A Griffin Patriarch and Lesser Griffins are pretty good in combat. What's also important about Lesser Griffins, which you can recruit obviously if you in reasonable numbers if you're going with for the Griffin Patriarch, is that they give you the battlefield flexibility, especially in siege battles. And sieges are pretty damn annoying to deal in a Total War Saga because you don't have artillery to break down the walls. And siege equipment, some siege equipment may be locked down behind technology. That was a pretty bad decision as far as I saw it, because it like made the situation that was already not that great for creative assembly sieges here actually worse. But when we're thinking about the Griffins, the battlefield flexibility from the fact they're flying and they're pretty damn strong is significant. The Hydra might be better in range, and the poison attacks, the spells might do a lot of damage, but just that kind of battlefield flexibility is pretty useful. And there's also a bunch of actions that you can gain by using the Griffin Patriarch. Though, to be honest, I probably wouldn't really bother with these like post-battle options. Or these campaign actions, because if I'm going with the Griffin Patriarch, I'm certainly not wasting it by just to get a bit of a dilemma between the Armaspoi and the Griffins. Now, looking at the Griffin Patriarch, you have Harmony. Yes, Troy created the Harmony system that Grand Cafe does use, and actually, like Total War Saga Troy Mythos, they're much fucking better. Because then Cafe does have it. Because in Cafe, everything is Harmony. Whereas with the Griffin Patriarch, you may benefit from having pure Harmony, but you can also go one way or another, and that won't necessarily hurt you that much with respect to it. Like, whereas with Grand Cafe, if you go on one side or another, it will hurt you. There's never any benefit with that. Whereas with the Griffin Patriarch, there is a lot of benefits one way or another. So if you go with the Armaspoi, you get extra gold production, you get recruitment benefit, melee attack, and missile damage of Armaspoi. But the important thing is you get freaking gold production benefit. That's the most substantial thing. The Armaspoi units themselves, I would say, are not that great. Though, I will also emphasize is that you do get cavalry, medium cavalry. Not heavy cavalry, but you do get cavalry. Having cavalry when no one else has it is actually a pretty substantial benefit in its own right in a game for like field battles. The infantry units, the spearmen and the hunters, not great, but the skirmishers, like they're javelin cavalry, they're skirmisher cavalry units. But they can also hold their own relatively well. Like they can do decently well in terms of like flanking. And when it comes to flanking, you do get the ability of recruiting lesser Griffins. And funnily enough, the structure themselves, you do have two structures, and they're actually cheaper in some ways than, at least in terms of lumber and stone, than what you would get with the Hydra structures. Now, let's talk about the structures. I think I may have some building slots to work with over here. So, you get two different structure. You get the Griffin Airy Chain, which increases your Lesser Griffin capacity up to +3 and reduces your upkeep cost of Lesser Griffins as you go higher and higher, and improves your melee attack. But this will push you towards the Griffin side. And if you go down the Griffin side, you're going to lose gold production. Now, -5% gold production isn't really too big of a deal, and it does increase your capacity, and it does give you melee attack and all kinds of benefits. And I'm not sure, like, what I would wonder is, like, how that would work, because I really haven't really bothered with this. The problem with all these units, by the way, is, like, you can get a powerful single entity for an army, but, like, are you going to really devote the resources to build these structures in a campaign? Probably not, to be blunt about it. The reason you probably wouldn't is because by the time you're getting, like, look at this situation. It's turn 60. I've barely gotten the Griffin Patriarch over here. Could have gotten, like, turn 40 or 50, whatever, but I didn't want to wait until I could get a high-end army to deal with the quest. So you can get to, like, turn 40 or so. By that point, you've pretty much won the campaign, so, like, this is not so relevant, but in most cases. But what's crucial here is, like, you can easily get Griffins, like Lesser Griffins, and get them in a bunch of different armies to get that kind of battlefield flexibility, especially in sieges. And you can also go for Aramaspoi skirmishers, which just require tier 3. What's interesting here, though, is that the Aramaspoi camp gives you a significant gold production benefit. And it's not small. It really, really isn't small. Like, plus 30% gold production is significant in quite a lot of ways. So you have reasons to actually use. Like, you may not have reasons to recruit Aramaspoi infantry units, but you certainly have reason to recruit the cavalry. You have reasons to get the structure. You have reasons to get the Lesser Griffins. And when we're looking at the Griffins, it starts getting a bit ridiculous when we're looking at what kind of benefits. Like, the choices you have, it will be determined, like, which harmony you want to go. Like, structures determine harmony. Some actions on a campaign map may determine harmony, and the camps themselves determine harmony. The upgrades here as well. So you can, like, at the first tier, at the first skill, you can go for the Aramaspoi side. And this is actually, can be a bit of a ridiculous benefit when you're thinking, like, I for gold compared to the other two. Like, the first one gives you bronze feathers, potent, which what that does is it gives you armor and missile resistance, which is pretty useful. The second one gives you, like, harmony, like, just pushes things towards the center. So it gives you a battle speed for all units and armies with at least one Aramaspoi unit, morale to units with the one Griffin unit, experience per turn, well, okay, with experience with Aramaspoi, and replenishment with at least one Griffin unit. That can be substantial. But what is ridiculous as far as I see it is you get a minus 30% gold recruitment cost for all units and minus 20% gold construction unit. And also construction time and unit cap for Aramaspoi. Like, if you're going for Aramaspoi, that is substantial. The reason that's substantial is temples cost a lot of freaking can cost a lot of freaking gold to rededicate. Not in the sense of building them. Building them is easy, but what you really want to do with temples, if I just go back to Salamis over here, what you want to do with the temple is you want to go over here once you build the temple to a higher enough tier, because this is how you gain favor with the god. Like, this is how you build up favor, right? And building up favor is kind of important. Like, I would say, like, Aphrodite, Hephaestus, and Zeus are pretty damn substantial. Though Poseidon can be useful, for instance, as an example. Some others can be useful as well. But, like, the three main gods I would bother with are Zeus, Aphrodite, and Hephaestus, especially Aphrodite early on. Hephaestus for the bronze benefit. And with that kind of ability, like, when you take over Salamis and it has a shrine, it won't help you with that god. It won't gain you favor. So you'll probably want to rededicate it. But it's an expensive process in terms of gold. Well, the big benefit with the Griffin Patriarch in general is gold, and reducing the construction cost by 20%, like that would save me 120 gold. 120 gold per temple just to rededicate to that particular tier is actually a substantial amount of money. And it's also like, how much money are you spending to recruit the gold, the gold units? I may have an army to show that over here somewhere. Yeah, I do. So some units, some really expensive units, some really powerful units, like for instance, like with Ajax, like Ajax's Walls companions, they do cost gold. So if I can reduce this cost by 30%, well, that's almost a third of the cost. So I'd be dropping it by like 50 gold per unit. It depends on the hero you're talking about, the epic hero you're talking about. Some are going to benefit more from this, but every character in the game, every epic hero, every legendary lord does have units that are pretty good that do cost gold. So the Griffin really helps you build extremely powerful armies, build temples, gain favor of the gods, if you go for that. But even if you go for other things, there's still benefits. Casualty replenishment, experience per turn, or just making the Griffin Patriarch much better in battle, though it is pretty substantial. Then later on, as you're going for all of this, there's more and more benefits. Not quite as ridiculous as the very first one, but still, like all kinds of benefits that, like at the second skill, the benefits are not necessarily as significant as the first one can be. At the third level, things go crazy again. So you can gain 300 gold, 300 to gold mine capacity faction wide. That isn't insignificant. And then you get plus 20%. If you go for Sacred Shine, you get plus 20% to provincial gold production bonus from Arimaspoi. So you're looking, and plus 2 gold a turn from each Arimaspoi building. So if I go here and I make that, so I go here, I get 50% gold production. Now, granted, this province isn't producing gold, but you get the idea. Like if I were to, this one can produce gold. So if I built the Arimaspoi buildings here, I would be gaining a lot of gold per turn. And the thing about gold is that gold will trade easily, and you can gain thousands and thousands of wood, stone, bronze, food. So it really helps you build a very powerful and scalable empire with that. Now, when you're thinking about this, you might be wondering, how the fuck is Cerberus better, right? Because obviously Cerberus is going to be number one, but I'll get into that when I get there. But suffice to say, it is pretty ridiculous when you're looking at this. This beats anything the Hydra has, hands down, just all these kind of benefits, like just the gold benefit. You do have to sacrifice some things in order to get that, but like consider it's like 20% campaign movement range. Even if you're not going for the gold benefit, like 20% campaign movement range with for armies with at least one Arimaspoi unit. Okay, having one skirmisher unit in each army, it's like, okay, I'll take that bloody thing, right? Happiness. Or you can reduce the upkeep cost of lesser griffins. And lesser griffins are 500 food, so you're reducing it to 400 food per turn. And then finally, when we're looking at it, not necessarily as a substantial benefit, but yeah, getting like tier 1 and tier 3 on the Griffin Patriarch is ridiculously strong. So you get flying capabilities, you get cavalry, you get massive gold production benefits, as well as other potential benefits in your campaign. It is absurdly good. Finally, and number 1, we have Cerberus. It doesn't have the same flying capability that the Griffin Patriarch does have, nor the cavalry capability that Arimaspoi do provide, but what it does provide is pretty insane in quite a few ways. So let's look at Cerberus. It's a pretty powerful unit. It's probably the best in melee out of the 3 of them. Though obviously the Griffin Patriarch has the flank capability, but when we're looking at damage, when we're looking at armor, it is extremely strong. And the units themselves are actually all worth it. the reason they're all worth it is like, look at the Marksmen of Elysium. They're one of the best range units in the game. They have good armor, they're unbreakable, they won't die, they do a lot of freaking damage compared to, say, the Hydra units or any other range unit. The Wretched Shades, not really that great units, not really worth bothering with, but the Spearmaster of Elysium, these are top tier units. All of them. Like, you get Giant Shades, you get Spearmasters, you get Marksmen. These three are all worth using. Now, I'm still not necessarily too fond of going down that particular path, but here's the crucial thing about the units that you can recruit to Cerberus. You don't have to build a structure to get these units, because you can recruit them just next to Cerberus, and they're recruited from a pool of units. There is a limit, of course, on how many you can have, but the whole point about these units is about, like, getting them close to where Cerberus is. And obviously, you can recruit them in a secondary army, no problem. Or send them in a secondary army. And they don't cost money to recruit. They cost the souls, the total souls. So you have a souls mechanic. Gee, I wonder where the Warriors of Chaos got their souls idea. Yes, Troy created a lot of ideas for Warhammer 3. But they cost no upkeep, and they just cost souls. Now, the downside, and there is a downside, is that they don't have any replenishment by default. So you can't recover these guys, but that's no problem. They are disposable. That's the whole point about these shades. Like, they're disposable units. It depends on how many field armies you're encountering with Cerberus, because you do need to go with the post-battle option, or you do need to sack a settlement in order to gain souls. Or you can gain souls passively through the structures that are built. So over here, I will showcase this. So, if I can actually, yeah. So we have this building chain. We have the offering pit that goes into the altar of oblations. Now, what this does is generates souls per turn and allows you at tier 2 to recruit all units. Like, these units are comparable, like, except the Wretched Shades. The other units are all comparable to some pretty high tier units, and they only cost souls. They don't cost gold, they don't cost food, they don't have any upkeep cost. What's also ridiculous with Cerberus is this fact. This structure, when you build it, I think I have it built somewhere here. Yeah, there we go. So when you build this structure in a particular province, what this does is it does two things, both of which are absurdly good. One, it increases your resource generation by 20%. I made a big deal about how much gold you can get from the Griffin Patriarch. You're going to be running around rich beyond measure. This is a legendary campaign for a record. I've got 57k food, almost 4k lumber production at turn. Like, it is pretty later on, but I do have a lot of production. Keep in mind, I'm not running around with one or two armies over here. I'm running a lot. I'm running around with quite a few. Like, I have two. Well, I have one army over here that I'm recruiting to full stack. It is a pretty high-end army. Then I have another army with Diomedes over there. Then two other armies over here, maybe even three if I'm not mistaken. I might have three. No, I just have two. So I have quite a few armies in this campaign. I have a pretty big empire, and the resource production benefit that you get is substantial. And mind you, it's not just the number of armies, it's like the quality of the troops. Like, these guys have some pretty solid troops, like all of them. Like, these are tier 3 units, for instance, as just as an example. So you get a massive resource production benefit, but does cost souls, so you do need to feed souls. Crucially, though, you lose any kind of happiness. So when you're doing those kind of offerings, a province will no longer have to worry about any kind of level of happiness in it. Now, granted, if you have a high level of happiness, then that can, you might be losing some potential benefits there. But at the same time, if you're dealing with low level of happiness, this will literally prevent rebellions from occurring. Yes, making a pact with Hades gives you quite a few benefits. And that's just like something you gain for recruiting Cerberus. You don't need to level it up. That's pretty substantial in its own right, that you get these powerful units, you get Cerberus, you get that production benefit without having to worry to level up. Because leveling these creatures by the time you get them can actually take a substantial amount of time. That's another bonus. Those are already 3 significant bonuses in their own right. And then we can actually look at the upgrades that you do get. At tier 1, at the first skill, you can increase your income from sacking settlements by 30%. Give this guy to Achilles. Achilles will be the richest person in the universe. The reason is Achilles is best played if you're really going down the greenskin path. Like, if you want to know how Achilles plays, you're playing a greenskin campaign basically as Achilles, because he gets a ridiculous sum of money from sacking and looting settlements. And at Cerberus, it adds to it, and it gets pretty ridiculous. It also gives you a construction cost reduction for all Cerberus buildings and construction time for all buildings in the region. You can get Shade Battlefield healing. That can help you heal a unit in a battle, though I don't think it will give you replenishment on a campaign. I don't know, because I've always obviously taken Slaves Beyond Death, because it is obviously far better. Or you can get Shade Wrath and reduce the recruitment cost of all Cerberus units. Then you get at tier 2, you get an ability. You get various choices, right? Between what you want to buff. Like, do you want to buff the marksman? Do you want to buff the giant shades? Or do you want to buff the spearmasters? Depends on what you want to focus on. The spear, I'd probably focus on buffing the marksman, because they're genuinely really great range units that are worth using. At tier 3, you can increase that production benefit by 50%. That is absurd. It gets, so you're looking at plus 50% to production of all resources from Shade labor. It gets ridiculous, and it also reduces the cost of the souls of Shade labor by minus 40%. It's all about the souls. Or you can reduce the cooldown of Cerberus activated abilities, or get Bound to Suffer to Cerberus. I personally probably go for the production benefit, because it is ridiculously strong. And then finally, at the highest level, you can give your unit some more power, and finally get replenishment for those units if Cerberus is embedded in that army. So really, what I should be doing here is like just give Diomedes a full army of Shade units and just go to town with it once I get Cerberus to a high enough level to get replenishment. And also sack settlements, because that can give you replenishment, or occupy them, because that can give you replenishment. It ends up being pretty damn ridiculous overall when you add everything up. So Cerberus gives you the most economic benefits, gives you really cheap and very powerful units, with the downside, of course, of not having replenishment with them, but you will eventually gain it potentially. As I said, massive economic bonus from the start, and crucially get a lot of benefits just by recruiting it, and it does get stronger as you go higher level, but very, very importantly, you get a lot of benefits right from the moment you've recruited the big dog. So the dog wins hands down, because it is, as I said, it is difficult to level these creatures. So the Griffin Patriarch has its own benefits, but you really need to level it up. The Cerberus, yeah, it has benefits if you level it up, but it gets a substantial amount of power right off the bat, which you can use. And keep in mind, like, I got Cerberus pretty quickly in this campaign. Like, I sent a tier 3 army to get it, so I got it relatively quickly, and I've only really got it to rank 2. So those kind of benefits, those kind of economic benefits, are substantial to have right off the bat. And to only have one building chain that combines everything that you need, compared to the freaking Hydra, 4 different building chains. The Griffin Patriarch is in a better position, right, with 2 different building chains, but yeah, you have to build 2 different buildings. With Cerberus, you build 1, and you get the construction cost reduction, and you get a massive economic benefit. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.